Everyone, and thank you for joining SMS today. As you know, today is the concluding session of today. With, as we have had a PhD, we had so many sessions on 128A, and इसके बाद भी I think you'll have a lot of doubts. And as Arpit just rightly shared today morning, right now, that there will be more litigations going on even after the amnesty scheme sets in. So, without further ado, we'll just go back to Arpit will take us through the deliberation on some of the questions left, and then we'll start with the forum.
Thank you, Rupji. It seems that your bandwidth is low since you are traveling, so I would be starting the session and
Yes.
sharing the. So what we have decided is that briefly in next half an hour we would be completing rest of the questions, and then we would be opening the session for questions. And there was one query in the last session regarding the scope of the term self versus liability. So what I have done is I have prepared a brief slide on that, and we would be discussing on that aspect also. So we were on question number 13, whether payment to avail waiver under section 128 can be made by utilizing ITC. So I think there is no doubt on this that yes, it can be used provided it is falling within the scope of output liability. And if it is not falling within the scope of output liability, then the circular says that it has to be paid through cash ledger. For erroneous refund also, one cannot use the ITC, they have to use the cash ledger for making the payment. Next question is whether the benefit of waiver under section 128A be availed for import IGST payable under the Customs Act. So this is a question wherein they said that whether 128 can be availed for import IGST payable under Customs Act. So they have replied that no, in such case demand is not issued under section 73 of CGST Act but is issued under provision of Customs Act. Therefore, such cases are not covered under waiver of interest or penalty of both under section 128A. So the entire emphasis which is there in the FAQ is that the order has to be issued under section 73. Once the order has been issued under section 73, then only the scheme would apply. Once the order is going beyond the scope of the section of section 73, then the scheme would not apply. And that's why somewhere I think that that's why they have clarified, in my opinion, incorrectly, that even though the order might be passed under section 73, but still the late fees and that interest on self assessed liability would not be covered, because in their opinion section 73 is not at all required for recovery of late fees and interest on self assessed liability. That's why they have excluded those two scenarios from the scope of the amnesty scheme. Coming to the next question, with retrospective insertion of subsections 5 and 6 to section 16 of the CGST Act, the tax demanded in the notice oblique statement oblique order reduces. Whether the entire tax amount demanded in the notice has to be paid in such case to avail the benefit under section 128A. So what they have said that since the applicant is only required to pay what is covered under 128A, and 16.5 and 16.6 has been inserted retrospectively, so he would not be required to pay the amount for 16.5 and 16.6, and he is only required to pay the amount which is there in 128A. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Hello? Is there any query? So for 16.5, 16.6, the amount is not required to be paid, and the amount is also required to be filled, which is pertaining to 16.5 and 16.6 in SPL 01 or SPL 02. But the person who is supposedly a person is having a common order for 3B versus 2A and 16.4. then in such case, only an application number 128A is required to be filed. There is no requirement for filing a separate rectification application for rectification of demand which has been issued under section 16 subsection 4. So are there any queries till now? Any point of discussion? Now coming to the last question. In case of application form in form GST SPL 02, where the applicant has paid full or partial amount of tax through form GST DRC 03, whether the said applicant is mandatorily required to file application in DRC 3A for such tax amount which he desires to get adjusted against tax demand as per form DRC 07, DRC 08 or form APL 04. So what they have said that if a person has paid any amount through DRC 03, then form DRC 3A has to be mandatorily filed so that the the amount which has been created in electronic liability register is reduced by the amount which has been paid through DRC 03. So here comes I have one small issue which can be there, that supposedly a demand has been created and which is in appeal, and part of the amount has been paid in 3B. And for the rest of the amount, the appellant is in appeal, but the assessing officer did not admit that you have paid it in 3B. And since the appeal is pending, and this FAQ and also the rule which has been incorporated in CGST rules says that only amount in DRC 03 is allowed to be set off, and which has to be done through DRC 3A. So in that case, the appeal would have to be decided, in my opinion, by 31st of March 2025. The appellant should try to get it decided, because if that is not done, then in my opinion, the entire scheme which is there, it does not allow set off of amount which has been paid through 3B in any mode. Any views on this aspect?
But it is very rare, right? Such case where a demand under 73 is discharged through 3B. That will not.
Supposedly, a part of the amount has already been discharged to 3B, but the assessing officer does not admit that you have discharged to 3B, and he issues the order for the entire demand.
Correct. Possible. That is possible.
Such a case where, like the ROD2 2018 has not excluded the period for payment of tax after September to March, even though ITC is allowed, correction of 37 is allowed. So those who have adjusted of 17-18 liabilities in 3B of March 2019, they report that they have paid, but unfortunately, since ROD allows only up to September, I am not considering it, and that will be passed as an order. And since the time period for refund is also over, they said they cannot even claim refund. So those adjustments we are right now in appeals.
Yes, and supposedly a taxpayer has paid a part of the liability in 3B post, say, October. For 1920, they have paid a liability through 3B after 20th of October 2020. And he was not aware that it has to be paid through DRC 03, and there are many cases here wherein such demand has been created on account that you have not paid through 3B, and section 39 only allows that any adjustment can only be made up to the due date of September. So these cases are also there. So somewhere down the line, this rule and the circular are not catering to that part.
Correct.
Now, there is one more scenario which I had thought of, that supposedly I have a appellate order from an appellate authority which has been decided against me, and I want to opt for the amnesty scheme. So I pay the due amount by 31st of March 2025. Now I've also filed my SPL 01 in April 25. Now then the tribunal is created, and then I have to file an appeal before the tribunal, so that in case the amnesty application is rejected, so I can fall back upon my appeal before the tribunal. So the entire scenario does not cover the scenario wherein I am filing an appeal before the tribunal after filing of SPL 02 against after filing of SPL 02, because as of now I cannot file an appeal before the tribunal. I can only make an application before the assessing authority, that I will be filing an appeal whenever the tribunal is created. So I file an SPL 01, SPL 02 in April 25, and then a tribunal is created, and whether I can file an appeal subsequently after filing of SPL 02, because entire scheme is only covering only that matter wherein the appeal has been filed before filing of an SPL 02. But in case of tribunal, there would be many cases wherein the appellate order has gone against the assessee and he has filed SPL 02 and tribunal is created afterwards. Because this issue also came up when we had a meeting with the commissioner here in Jodhpur. So one of the officers came with a suggestion that when in cases wherein there is a appellate order against the assessee and he is filing an SPL 02 and he has filed an application also before the assessing authority, that he would be filing an appeal as and when the tribunal would be created. So he would also be required to give a declaration that he would not file an appeal and once the tribunal is created. So I said that if that would be the case, then there should be an option, and the scheme only says for restoration appeal which has already been filed. But in case of tribunal, how can the appeal would then be restored in such cases in case amnesty application is decided against me?
So you mean to say that we need to file the appeal and then withdraw the appeal? Because only when you withdraw the appeal, your application is deemed to be being filed.
But one cannot file SPL 02 without the application for withdrawal of appeal being filed. So in the tribunal cases, the appeal would be filed more or less in the month of April and May. By then, in many cases, SPL 02 would already have been filed.
Correct. Because the online application is not even available right now for tribunal
Yes.
application.
Yes. So in my opinion, this is one scenario which has not yet been covered in the FAQs and which needs to be addressed. That what would happen in such cases? In case appeal before the tribunal is filed after filing of SPL 02, because tribunal would be created only after that. And time limit would also be there for filing of appeal before the tribunal.
Sir, isn't there a implied kind of restriction that you cannot go on appeal then? Because the scheme, how it is worded, and seeing, I know specifically it's not dealt anywhere, but when they say your existing appeal itself has to be withdrawn, and if you're going to this scheme, then how would you go to tribunal?
Very valid point, because the only restriction what I feel for filing of appeal subsequently is in case of SPL 05. And in case of SPL 01 and 02, it says that existing appeals have to be withdrawn. And that application has to be filed along with the application. But in case of tribunal, there is no tribunal as of now, and there would be no tribunal as on the date when SPL 02 would be filed. So there would be a challenge to the assessee, because the entire emphasis of the scheme is that in case the application is decided against you, your appeal would be restored. So how it would happen in case of tribunal, because tribunal is not created, so that needs to be addressed, and somewhere down the line, this needs to be communicated that this is an issue which would be there for the appellate orders.
Right.
And
But
in such cases, in my opinion, the application in SPL 02 should be filed on the last date, waiting for the tribunal to be filed. And in case it is possible, the tribunal is formed. So first the appeal before the tribunal should be filed, and then only SPL 02 should be filed, to avoid such unnecessary issues if no clarification is issued on this aspect.
correct. But in case tribunal is not formed, then there is no question of filing the appeal to tribunal later on.
Yes. In my opinion, somewhere down the line, once the issue, scheme gets into operation and filing of form start, so this issue would be the one of the very first issue which would have to be addressed, because many of the persons who have got an appellate order against them would be filing an amnesty scheme.
Right.
So with this, we conclude the FAQs which have been issued through the circular. Now, there was one query regarding the scope of the term self-assessed liability. So what I have done is I have prepared a small slide on that. See, this is the FAQ. This is the FAQ, which says whether the benefit provided under Section 128A will be applicable in cases where the tax due has already been paid and that notice or demand orders under Section 73 only pertains to interest and oblique or levied. So I have highlighted the relevant extract. However, the benefit of waiver of interest and penalty shall not be applicable in cases where the interest has been demanded on account of delayed filing of returns or delayed reporting of any supply in the return. As such, interest is related to demand of interest on self-assessed liability and does not pertain to any demand of tax dues and is directly recoverable under subsection 12 of Section 75. So I'm not going into the validity aspect of this clarification, that how correct is this clarification, but taking it on the face as correct. Now, what are the various scenarios which are there and how they would be dealt with as per this FAQ? So this FAQ covers two scenarios where the interest has been demanded on account of delayed filing of returns. So if I filed my return after delay, so this FAQ says that the interest would not be covered under the waiver scheme, or the delayed reporting of any supply in the return. So any supply which has been reported after delay in the return is also not covered. Now, if we go through Section 7512, Section 7512 says, notwithstanding anything contained in Section 73 or 74, where any amount of self-assessed tax in accordance with a return furnished under Section 39 remains unpaid, either wholly or partly, or any amount of interest payable on such tax remains unpaid, the same shall be recovered under the provision of Section 79. The explanation says, for the purpose of this subsection, the expression self-assessed tax shall include the tax payable in respect of details of outward supplies furnished under Section 37, but not included in the return furnished under Section 39. So, in my opinion, Section 7512 is only specifically covering those issues wherein the self-assessed tax has not been paid in accordance with the return furnished under Section 39. So, for explanation, they have clarified that supply has been reported in GSTR1, but tax has not been paid in 3B would be covered. But interestingly, the explanation, while explaining the scope of self-assessed tax, defines it shall include. So it's an inclusive definition, it's not an exhaustive definition. But if we go through 7512 main wording, then the scope is pretty much clear there, that self-assessed tax in accordance with the return furnished under Section 39. Now, if we go through Section 7311, see, Section 73 is covering two aspects, tax not paid and tax short paid. Out of the vast scope of tax not paid and tax short paid, 7311 only covers two aspects. One is where any amount of self-assessed tax or any amount collected as tax has not been paid. So out of those two broad scenarios, tax not paid and tax short paid, they have only covered self-assessed tax or any amount collected as tax. So in case wherein I have collected the tax but I have not paid in return. I am not shown in GSTR1. In my opinion, this would not be covered under the scope of self-assessed tax. Because had that been covered under the scope of self-assessed tax, there would have been no requirement to specify any amount collected as tax separately from self-assessed tax.
अन्विता हा टॉवेल घ्यायचा आहे का ग?
काय?
हा टॉवेल घ्यायचा
त्याचा वर गेलाय काल वर नेलेला आणि ब्रश पण
Hello?
काल आणला होता रात्री
Oh, someone's mic is on, not mute. Now, if we go through how self-assessment or self-assessed tax has been used in the statute in different provisions, starting with the definition of assessment. If we go through the definition of assessment, it says assessment means determination of tax liability under this act and includes self-assessment. And how self-assessment has been defined under section 59, every registered person shall self-assess the tax payable under this act and furnish a return for each tax period. So therefore, whatever has been reported in the return, that means it has been self-assessed. What has not been reported in the return, that means it has not been self-assessed. And once any amount has been self-assessed and reported in the return filed under section 39, in my opinion, then only it would be covered in the scope of self-assessed tax. If we go through the definition of valid return, which has been given under section 2, it means valid return means a return furnished under subsection 1 of section 39 on which self-assessed tax has been paid in full. So whatever tax which has been reported in 3B, I request all the participants to keep the mic on mute mode. So valid return, when we go through the definition of valid return, it means a return furnished under subsection 1 of section 30 on which self-assessed tax has been paid in full. So whatever tax which has been reported in the return of section 39, that would be covered under the scope of self-assessed tax. And if that self-assessed tax has been paid in full, then only it would be treated as a valid return. Now coming to section 41, the erstwhile section 41 which was there, now which has been substituted. The erstwhile section 41 provided that every registered person shall, subject to such condition restriction as be prescribed, be entitled to take the credit of eligible input tax as self-assessed in the return. So whatever input tax which has been entered in the return would be treated as self-assessed. And 41(2) say the credit referred to in subsection 1 shall be utilized only for payment of self-assessed output tax as per the return. So again, the same meaning is coming that whatever has been given in the return, that would be treated as self-assessed output tax. Similarly, section 49 subsection 2, the input tax rate as self-assessed in the return of a registered person shall be credited to his electronic credit ledger. So whatever has been entered in the return has been self-assessed. And similarly in section 49 subsection 8, it says that self-assessed tax has to be paid, which is related to the returns of previous period. Self-assessed tax related to the returns of the current tax period has to be paid. So if we go through the entire scheme and how the term self-assessment or self-assessed tax or self-assessed input tax has been mentioned in the statute, in my opinion, it comes pretty clearly that whatever has been mentioned in the return is self-assessed. Whatever has not been mentioned in the return would not be treated as self-assessed. So now there are these 7 scenarios on which I would like to have the views of the members. But before going on to these scenarios, I would ask the members to share their views on what should be the scope of the term self-assessed tax.
If you can go to the previous slide. So they have defined assessment, but self-assessed is not defined, which is
Assessment has been provided in section 59. I have not mentioned the heading of section 59. Self-assessment is
Right.
defined, the scope of self-assessment has been made
Scope is
in section 59.
correct. So if we think of a practical scenario that if the supply has been made and my self-assessment has gone wrong, that is,
Yes.
I have filed my return incorrectly. For a value of 1 lakh rupees, I have reported only 20,000 rupees.
Yes.
So my self-assessment has gone wrong
Yes.
to the tune of 80,000 rupees.
Yes.
So will that 80,000 not be treated as not covered under the scope then?
That is how I see the entire the term self-assess has been used in the, because whatever I am reporting in the return, that is also an assessment. So if I have
Correct.
not reported in the return, that means it has not been assessed.
Right.
And that's why they have included self-assessment in the definition of assessment also. And that's why section 155 says that even the burden of proof is on the recipient to prove, because had they not included section 155 separately, by virtue of section 59, the entire onus would have been on the department to prove that my self-assessment was wrong.
But 155 is only on input tax credit.
Yes. So that's why on the leaving aside input, the entire burden is on the department to prove that I have incorrectly self-assessed the liability. Whenever they said that you have short paid the liability or not paid the liability.
No, I think we should look at 39(9), which provides opportunity to rectify any errors within time period prescribed, and not 155.
Yes, if I have rectified in section 39(9) by within the time limit, it again comes under the purview of self-assessment.
Exactly, that is true.
Let us take the cases where this issue is going to come up. Like the classic case will be pre-GST, pre-7512 amendment 1 versus 3B. Many of the proper officers have taken to 73 to demand 1 versus 3B as liability unless you prove it otherwise. So now let us assume that such a DRC 7 is going to be subject matter of 128, and then I make an application in SPL 2. Can they use para 4 of 238 to reject it? Will be the question.
In my opinion, they will do it definitely by way of para 4. But again, what we have discussed earlier also, that once they have invoked section 73 in the order, then they cannot go back and say that we have issued an incorrect order.
No,
Yes,
there's where another aspect. 7512, even if they make recourse to it, 7512 has two issues. One, there is a pre-amended 7512 and a post-amendment 7512. So for those notices which resulted into an order prior to the amendment which was made in 7512, can we still call it it was self-assessed tax at that point of time?
There is one judgment of Madhya Pradesh High Court on this issue, wherein even before the amendment, they had said that if someone has reported in GSTI 1 and not reported in 3B, it would be covered, it can be recovered directly. And that after that decision, only this amendment was made as the explanation was inserted.
Okay, now second issue, 7512 is for the limited purposes of that section. So can I apply that as a expanding provision into 128A when 7512 itself says it is only for those two sections?
That's why they have clarified that in their opinion, since resort to section 73 was not at all required, therefore the interest is not covered under the scope of amnesty because 73 is not at all required for recovery of that interest.
No, I mean the circular. Can you please take para 4 once again? Is it available on screen?
Yes. I request the participants to mute their mic and other than who are discussing, because there is someone from whose background the voice is coming. This is para 4.
Okay, let us go to para 4. It says, however, where the tax has the para 4 specifically says where the tax due has already been paid and the notice pertains to interest or not. So when you are talking about a case where 1 versus 3B is the allegation and tax, interest and penalty is under DRC 7, does the proper officer even get to apply para 4 since it does not specifically address that scenario?
Once again, can you specify the query?
The circular is seeking to place an additional restriction and is binding on the officer. I agree.
Yes,
Whether or not it is correct. But specifically that para is only in cases where tax has already been paid, which is either appropriated in the demand order or which is not only in interest and penalties issued like some states do. But where the tax itself remains unpaid, the 1 versus 3B is there, does para 4 question even arise?
Yes, in my opinion, it would still arise because that tax or interest could have been directly recovered under Section 7512.
Agreed. But in that scenario, the proper officer cannot fall back to Circular 238 because none of the questionnaires answer this situation. It only says where the tax has already been paid, the same shall be considered for 128A. The benefit of interest and payment shall be applicable where the demand is the interest is pending to self-assessed tax. So it does not, that question does not apply per se to tax is also being pending. So only for interest and penalty waivers where the notice or demand is for interest and penalty, then the circular is addressing that para. So can the proper officer go one step beyond and says, anyway, it implies that the tax also cannot be covered and so I am restricting you?
No, I look at it another way, that supposedly my tax and interest are pending. So
Yep.
I have to, while filing the application, I have to pay the tax. Once the tax has been paid, because there is no restriction that tax should have been paid either before the scheme or during the scheme. So when the tax has been paid, again I come to para 4 only for waiver of interest and penalty.
No, that cannot be the view because I will tell you one thing. In all cases where I'm going for amnesty, I have to pay the tax. So the scheme contemplates payment of tax by default. So the intention of the usage of the word where the tax due has already been paid, it does not contemplate payments made for getting into the scheme when the same was not made prior to that.
But again, there might be a difference of opinion, but I think that question 4 would apply wherein the tax has already been, although the scope of question 4 is only for the tax already paid, but how the answer has been given, because the second paragraph starts with however the benefit of waiver and penalty shall not be applicable in the cases where the interest has been demanded on account of delayed filing of return. So all the cases wherein whether the tax was not whether tax was paid earlier or whether tax have now been paid, in my opinion, the second para would be covering both these cases because that's how it has been structured also, and that is the intent of the clarification also. I'm not going into the correctness of the clarification.
So ideally, even for shockos with tax, they will reject citing para 4.
Yes, and that is the view which has been already taken at ground level in Rajasthan in the SGST. They have already taken a view that you are not eligible for the self-assessed interest because para 4 denies it.
Okay, another question on 128A. No, please, I'll wait.
Yeah. RPG.
Yes, sir.
One more issue which is connected is that for the purpose of, say, some return which was filed and tax was paid, and after 2 years it was noticed that tax was paid at a short tax was short paid, so debit note was raised after 2 years.
Yes.
And while raising the debit note, the differential tax was deposited.
Yes.
So now the question department has asked for the interest.
Yes.
So whether that can be covered by this para 4, I think that is self-assessed
Yes.
tax has already been paid, but interest was not paid.
Yes. So, in my opinion, since it has been, the debit note has been issued and the amount has been reported in the return.
Correct.
But again, this is only covering account of delayed filing of return or delayed reporting of any supply in the return. So, in case debit note is issued, it is neither delayed filing of return or not delayed reporting of any supply.
Only thing is debit note was raised after 2 years
Yes. The different the debit note for
for the
differential
differential
amount of
tax.
tax. Yeah, differential
amount.
amount of tax. So again, when I reported the debit note, as the act does not say that the tax interest has to be paid along with the debit note. The department might say that you have to you should have paid the interest and you should have paid the correct tax at that point. So in my opinion, that would not be falling within the scope of self-assessed liability and falling directly rejected by this para 4.
So we should get the benefit under
Yes,
section
yes, yes,
128.
yes.
So the
Right.
only classic case I feel which will come under this clause 4 is when a department comes for audit and then they go through all the invoices and they say that these invoice dates are pertaining to, say, let's say August, but you have reported in September, October, which means that there is a delay in reporting the invoices and therefore interest on that is applicable. Only in those cases I feel clause 4 will be applicable.
Let's take these 7 scenarios. What I could have thought of. The case 1 is a simple case that wherein the return has been late filed, which is specifically covered by para number 4. The second case is supply reported late in 3B, which has also been covered by para number 4. Now coming to case 3, tax although reported in GSTR 1, but paid through DRC 03. So the explanation, if we go through section 7512, for the purpose of this subsection, the expression self-assessed tax shall include the tax payable in respect of details of outward supplies furnished under section 37, but not included in the return furnished under section 39. So although this FAQ is only covering 2 scenarios, either where the interest has been where the return has been filed late, or where there has been a delayed reporting any supply, but the explanation to 7512 is making another scenario wherein details have been furnished in 1, but the same has not been included in the return furnished under section 39. So this is, in my opinion, this case 3 would also be covered under section 7512. This is the explanation. Because delayed filing and delayed reporting are covered, but the explanation includes another scenario wherein reported in 1 but not reported in the return furnished under section 39.
Oh, can I add an 8th scenario? One more scenario is possible here.
Which one?
Let us assume that there was a liability self-assessed in GSTR 1.
Yes.
And I have not filed GSTR 3B at all.
Yes.
What about that in relation to 73 notice and para 4?
I am not at all.
I have not filed GSTR 3B at all. I have declared everything in GSTR 1. Now, can this be eligible for 128A citing para 4?
Again, how we interpret the term but not included in the return furnished section 39. So
here it is not at all furnished. So it is past tense.
Yes.
So it is something that is 7512 per se does not apply. Section 59 also does not apply. So it is a pure demand under 73. Shouldn't I be eligible for 128A?
So if we go with the strict interpretation of section 7512, and how the wordings and explanation has been inserted. So somewhere down the line, it is a mandate that a return has to be furnished under section 39, and then only section 7512 can be applied. If the return has not at all been furnished under section 39, then there might be a scenario wherein section 73 would be applicable. And since section 73 would be applicable, so it would be covered under the scope of any amount collected as tax.
So a person who is more of a defaulter of 1 and 3B gets the benefit of 128A, but a person
Yes.
who has tried to comply doesn't get the benefit of 128A.
Yes, yes.
So in that
Views from the members?
scenario, isn't a case that we have declared in 1 but not filed 3B, but tax has been collected and not paid?
Yes. So that's what Unij is saying, that it would not be covered under 75, but would be covered under 73.
But there is a restriction in 128A na, for the tax collected and not paid.
No, there is no restriction in it only speaks about self-assessed tax.
Collected but not paid, isn't any restriction for 128A.
No, collected but not paid, there is no restriction.
And
That's
just
why-
because I filed GSTR 1 doesn't mean I've collected. There is no assessment, including self-assessment, unless a determination has been made. And that determination is proposed to be made in 73 to say there is only a tax short payment. So there the allegation of you have collected can never be proved unless there is a verification of the books. So if it is arising out of scrutiny and arising into 73, then the department cannot even put in a allegation that I've collected and I've retained and I have not paid.
In other words, section 75 says that assessment has to be made, and that self-assessment can only be made once I have filed a 3B. But since I have not filed a 3B, no assessment has been made. So first the assessment has to be made either by me or by the department. And since I have not made the assessment, the department would have to make the assessment under section 73, and then only they can create a demand against me and say that you have to pay it. Any views from the members? So coming to case 4.
So going
So
to
what
case
we have
3,
discussed is case 3. Yes.
Case 3 are saying that tax already reported in 1, not reported in 3B, that's fine. But you have paid the tax through DRC 03. Correct. So what you're saying is it is covered under the explanation to section 7512, saying that it's a self-assessed tax and there can be a demand for the tax itself again, because tax is being paid not through 3B but through DRC 03.
Yes, because the return has been furnished.
Correct.
And it has not been included in the return.
Right.
That's why Uniji created a situation 8 wherein 1 has been filed but no return has been furnished.
Right. So in this scenario, you're saying 128 will not apply in case where 3B has been wrongly filed.
Yes, yes. Because once a self-assessment has been made, and since it has been made incorrectly, therefore it is directly recoverable under 7512. But if a self-assessment has not been made since 3B has not been filed, therefore the one assessment has to be made at least before making the recovery, and that assessment can only be made under section 73.
Sir, I have one point. In case 3, only when a notice is issued under 76, we can say that amnesty is not applicable. And if it is issued under 73, it is still applicable.
Yes. That's how it will go. It should go.
In case 3, 76 cannot be applicable unless there is a proof that you have collected. So just because I have reported my liability of invoices in B2C as this so and so amount, doesn't mean that I've actually received and collected it.
We will keep the scope of the term collected for some later part, that what is the scope of term collected, whether it has to be actually received or not, and whether it can be deemed as a part of sale price. Coming to case 4. Tax neither reported in GSTR 1 nor reported in 3B, but reported in GSTR 9 and paid voluntarily through DRC 03. Again, going back to section 7512, where the self-assessed tax in accordance with return furnished under section 39. So in this case, the return has been furnished in 3B. A self-assessment has been made. That self-assessment has gone wrong. So therefore, additional supply has been reported in GSTR 9 and that tax has been paid through DRC 03. So in my opinion, for case 4, the benefit should not be applicable for the interest part. Any other views from the members?
It should be applicable in my view, because the restriction is only there in terms of delayed filing of the returns, which is returns under 39. And this scenario is an annual return.
I have another question on this particular thing. Let us assume that I had declared liability in 9, 3B and 1 is matching, but 9 is more. So there is a due. I have not yet paid it. So based on my scrutiny of 9, department sends a 73 notice stating that there is a liability under GSTR 9, and I don't have any merits to contest per se, which resulted into an order. But in the shock cause itself, they have specifically stated that since it's a liability declared in 9, based on the notification and the conditions attached to the 9, this has to be paid off in cash ledger. Now, since this demand is made, and can I am moving to 128A, and as per this discussion, I'm eligible for 128A since it is not self-assessed tax. And since 128A allows usage of credit ledger, can I pay off this liability using credit ledger?
But Oniji, in the example which you have stated, 1 has been filed and 3B has not. 3B has been filed.
No, the difference liability reported in 9 is over and above 193B.
So the difference liability which is over and above 1 and 3B, would it not be covered, notwithstanding anything contained in section 70-74, where any amount of self-assessed tax in accordance with return furnished under section 39 remains unpaid? Yes. So
this is 9 greater than 3B and 1.
9 is greater than 3B and 1. Yes.
And 9 says there has to be remittance in cash ledger. So the notice quoting the GSTR 9 instruction under 73 has stated you are liable to discharge this demand using cash ledger with interest and penalty under 73(9).
In my opinion, it can be paid through credit ledger, because not only this circular, but what they have principally laid down, that any output liability can be paid through self-assessed input tax credit. So this is my output liability, and once it is output liability, it can be paid through credit.
But it will contradict my original instruction 9.
Yes, I know that there's an instruction in GSTR 9, but somehow or the other, that instruction is followed in only very less of the cases, because it goes against how the law has been drafted and how it has been clarified subsequently.
Gaurav here from Ahmedabad. Just a point here that, I mean, even if you pay this output, which is declared only in GSTR 9 through your credit ledger, wouldn't it amount to self-declared interest liability and liable to be recovered automatically?
See, if we go through 7512, it says where any amount of self-assessed tax in accordance with the return furnished under section 39 remains unpaid. So if a 3B has been filed without the entire payment of tax of the liability, then only 7512 is applicable. In this case, so what 7512 is said that if liability has been declared in one and it has been not been paid in 3B, so there is a less payment of liability in accordance with the return furnished under section 39. But if I have filed an annual return wherein the liability has been additionally declared, it is not a return furnished under section 39. So, and similarly, this liability was also not reported in GSTR 1. So somewhere down the line, since it only caters to section 39 and not to section, not to annual return under section 44, so it should not be covered under section 7512.
So basically, here if somebody deliberately does not report, say B2C in all the GSTR 1 and 3B, and then finally pay it in December in 9, he'll go scot-free without interest, sir.
Yeah, that's what we are discussing in case 8. That's what Unnikrishanji has stated in case 8, that someone has not filed a 3B and only then in such case order has
Here,
been passed under
he has
section
filed 3B. Here he has filed 3B, but deliberately he has understated all the B2C liability. Take an example so that the recipient is not impacted, and he pays
Yes.
everything in December
Yes.
through 9.
So in the manner in which the section 59 and 7512 has been drafted, any liability which is not part of the return under section 39, it remains to be assessed. Even though it might be part of GSTR 9, but it still remains to be assessed. And once it still remains to be assessed, then 73 would have to be resorted. And that's why, in my opinion, whatever we are reporting through GSTR 9, we are selecting and paying through DRC 03 because it then becomes part of 73. That is payment of liability on account of self-ascertainment. It is not a self-assessment, but on account of self-ascertainment. So, concluding, because we have only 4 minutes left, the case 5 is tax neither reported in 1, nor reported in 3B, nor reported in 9, and paid voluntarily through DRC 03. So, somewhere down the line, it's similar to case 4. Case 6 is tax paid for short charge on supplies made. In my opinion, it is pretty simple that it would be covered. And tax collected but not paid and paid during inspection under section 67. So again, the same rationale what we have discussed, that since the liability has not gone through section 39, not gone through 3B, so it remains to be self-assessed. And once it remains to be self-assessed, a new assessment has taken place when I'm paying it to DRC 03. And by paying to DRC 03, it is not part of section 59, neither part of section 39.9. It is part of section 73.5 on account of self-ascertainment. Therefore, it should be eligible, even if I admit that this FAQ in question number 4 is correct. Although this is only an initial discussion, we are not concluding with a final conclusion, because there might be many more views that how section 7512 would have to be interpreted, and now the entire emphasis would be on how section 7512 has to be interpreted. This slide was only the starting point to commence the discussion, and since we have a limitation of time and we are already 9:57. So for the remaining time, if there any discussion, we can have that discussion.
What if
RPG?
I had a case where I filed appeal and through 107.11 department initiated a new proceedings and increased my liability? Can that be also subject to 128A?
That is enhancement under section 107.
Yes.
That is not under section 73.
But
So-
it is 107.11. It's also an order under 107. So doesn't mean that it is pending appeal before tribunal, and that also necessarily has to be an extension of the original initiated proceedings under 73. Because the
Go
original
through-
cause of action coming, the 107.11 is only as a result of the original appeal that came about from the proceedings under 73. So just because it was enhanced doesn't mean that, shouldn't it be seen as a continuation of the original demand and not a independent show cause notice proceedings per se? Otherwise, what happens is wherever there's a enhancement by the appellate authority, even though I am eligible for the original demand for 73 under 128A, the enhancement part I'll be out of 128A.
The proviso to section 128A only covers wherein the case has been reviewed under section 108 or appeal has been filed by the department. And then only they say that if the additional tax has been paid, then the benefit of the waiver would continue. So somewhere down the line, 107.11 is not covered anywhere in the 128A.
Arpit
So
sir,
if they would have,
is it, hello, sir, Arpit
Yes.
sir, Uni sir, actually, 107.11, can we say that it is only for issuing the show cause notice within the time limit specified under 73 or 74? Is it only meant for that purpose, right? It is not like something adjudication proceedings will be done by an appellate authority. It will be only, I understand that it is only to consider the time limitation within 73 or 74. The show cause notice can be issued. So I think that may not be required also for 128A. That is my view, but just thought on that.
in that case, under 107.11, the appellate authority would be enhancing the demand. The only condition is that the time limit for 73, 74 should have been there, so
Yeah.
that the enhancement can be made by the appellate authority.
Yes.
So the enhancement would be made, and that is what Oniji is saying, that once the enhancement has been made, so whether that enhancement would also be covered, because that enhancement would not be made by the proper officer, that would be made by the appellate authority while passing the order. And since second proviso to section 128A only covers appeal by the enhancement on account of appeal by the department of section 108. So whether the enhancement under section 107.11 would also be covered. So there is no
Arpit-
specific inclusion in the scheme for 107.11.
RPG, what 107.11 is in constitution of 73 only, and that will be out of 73 only. Because, it is in constitution of that. Then the doctrine of merger, like
Sir.
in rectification, here also, because this is the original order has been modified by addition of by creating additional demand. And in my view, it should be covered 128, sir.
The benefit of waiver has only been given for the enhancement made on 108 or 107.2 within a period of, if the payment is made within a period of 3 months. So supposedly enhancement has been made under section 107.11. What should be the time limit within which the payment has to be made?
Sir, in 108, it is a review order basically. It is a independent order. 108 is a independent order, sir. And 107 is in condition 73. That's my thought, sir.
I agree with you. Then what should be the time limit within which that amount has to be paid for the benefit of amnesty scheme to continue?
Sir, original time limit will apply to that. If that has been passed after that, then I think 128 may not be applicable in that case, because it has to fit in the scheme of 128 only. Then sir. Otherwise, no. Sir,
So what you are saying is that if the 107.11 order has been passed prior to 31st of March 2025 and that amount has been paid up to 31st of March 2025, then the benefit would apply to the entire amount.
That, sir. That
But
is
if the enhancement has been made subsequent to 31st of March 2025, then it would not be applicable.
yes, sir.
Yes. Completely agree. Completely agree.
And sir, one last point of mine is this is 7 cases you have told, you have made in your screen. in all these cases, I think there should be one qualification that in case the department has already issued 73 under these, in all these scenarios, then 128 will be applicable, sir. If
Sir,
this,
that's what I said, that treating that FAQ is correct. But because the first argument would always be that if a order has been issued on 73, then by default it is covered under 128A, whether it is self-assessed or not.
sir, that is that. That is our main contention, that if it is the interest is covered in 73, whether it is a delayed filing of anything, if it has been demanded under 73, then I think 128 should apply. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, Arpit sir, one last doubt. Once APL 4 is issued and appeal is completed, right? Again, they cannot go for 10711, right? I mean, go back and give you notice on that.
Yes, definitely.
Not possible.
Yes, once appeal has been decided, then they cannot go for enhancement.
Yeah.
So with this, we would conclude today's session and also discussion on section 128A. We have an extended discussion, and rather than settling the doubts, it has ignited more doubts about 128A, and this is only a starting, because when we would start filing for 128A, then new scenarios would be coming on a day-to-day basis, because every case would be having its own technicalities and specifications. Sharing these views not only in this session but also in the previous session on 128A. And since Arup ji is traveling, so I am the presenter and also the host today. So thanking you all, and let's look forward to the SMS on next Saturday. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.